Thank you. If everyone could please take their seats. Welcome to our next panel, to those of you here in this steamy room and those of you joining us online, hopefully with fans blowing on you. My name's Terry Schultz. I'm a reporter here in Brussels covering primarily defense and security. So I am really looking forward to getting answers to the questions posed by our panel. Who decides and who delivers when it comes to defense? Introducing our panelists and our keynote speaker, Defense Commissioner Andreas Kubilius, ASG Secretary General Camille Grand, who you have already seen once, so he's going to use this time to come up with some new material. Sven Kruk, he's the CEO of Quantum Systems, and on the end, Christian Hadjiminas, the CEO and founder of Theon Group and the founder of EFA. But first, we're going to hear from the Commissioner.
Well, good morning to everybody. We met last year at the same conference. The difference today is that it's warmer in the room, but also the difference is very important that Ukraine started to prevail. Prevailing on the battlefield, in the air and at sea. Ukrainian drones have brought the Russian advance to a standstill on land. Ukrainian drones command the air, disrupting Russian logistics behind the front lines. Drone commander Robert Brovdi says that up to 300 kilometers behind the front lines, it is unlikely Russian military vehicles will reach their destinations. And new long-range Ukrainian drones are striking deep behind enemy lines. Just yesterday, a satellite ground control center north of Moscow. As you see, Crimea without gasoline. Long lines for gasoline also in Moscow. Ukraine is no longer a receiver of support, but also a giver of support, supporting Gulf countries to defend against the drone danger from Iran, and also including the development of pan-European EDPCI projects for drone and air defense, long-range missiles production, etc. Putin, as we can see, is responding to Ukrainian successes with increasingly desperate attacks, like the attack on Kiev-Pechorsk Lavra monastery last week, funded 1,000 years ago. In Kiev, the birthplace of Orthodoxy, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, an attack on culture, on religion and civilization. A brutal attack, but not a surprising attack. Putin has no respect for history, or humanity, or Christianity. Provocations are increasing also against the Baltics and eastern flank. Last week, in Poland, the murder of Semyon Skrepetsky, a Russian dissident. Murdered, it appears, because of his paintings about Putin. Unfortunately, there can be more such attacks, worse such attacks, not only in Ukraine, but also in Europe. That Ukraine is prevailing does not mean the war is over. It does not mean Russia is weak. Russia, I would like to remind, is still outproducing us and is able to use millions of drones also against us. Putin is still a danger to European security. Putin is still willing and able to test Article 5. The question is, are we willing and able to defend ourselves and deter aggression? Our American allies are asking the same question. They are calling on us, Europeans, to take more responsibilities for our defense. This is not new. But now things are getting real, getting urgent. In his speech last week, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth called for a NATO 3.0, built on the NATO 1.0 type obligations of member states that won the Cold War, followed by the post-Cold War NATO 2.0, where the Europeans decided that we can enjoy peace dividend since the Americans alone will defend Europe. It is obvious. We need NATO 3.0. Secretary Hegseth asked for Europeans to be in the lead on conventional defense of the continent. This is NATO 3.0. In his speech, Secretary Hegseth announced a 6-month Department of War review, I quote him, to examine America's force posture and basing in Europe, end of quote. And the goal of this review, again, the quote, to ensure that NATO is moving fast and irreversibly towards Europe leading, stepping up to take primary responsibility for the defense of Europe. but also to make sure that America's forces are postured for America's global needs. And what this means is that America will move capabilities, especially material capabilities, to other parts of the world. And we have to be prepared. This could not be at some distant time in the future. It could be soon. We are now faced with an urgent challenge to replace American strategic enablers and heavy weaponry. We need to remember that Europe very heavily depends now on the Americans for strategic enablers like air-to-air refueling, space-based intelligence. Without such capabilities, we will be weaker in our defense, weaker in our deterrence. If we don't build these capabilities, that could be an open invitation for Putin to test us. We need to pay the price for peace to raise the cost of war. Filling strategic gaps will cost hundreds of billions. The Kiel Institute, in their Sparta to Zero paper, estimates 500 billion euro, much more than the 130 billion euro the Commission proposes for defense and space in the next multi-annual EU budget. This kind of money can only be found on a national level, where member states will spend around 7 trillion euro during the next 10 years, according to their pledges given to NATO. But for that to be successful, it needs to be spent together and European. We have done a lot in the last year. Safe loans, 150 billion. Ukraine support loans, 60 billion. Member states pledges, as I said before, 7 trillion for next 10 years for our defense. And many proposals and initiatives on defense. To cut red tape for industry, improve military mobility, and proposals to build pan-European projects, European defense projects of common interest. If we hadn't done all that, we would now be in a catastrophic situation. We have a strong foundation for action, but foundations alone are not enough for defense and deterrence. We now need to double down. The next couple of years can be especially challenging, dangerous, and unpredictable. We learn how to raise additional funds. We still need to learn how to spend them in an effective way in order to outproduce, out-innovate, and outgun Russia. So, you ask, what is our strategy? There are three things we now need to do and are doing. First, support Ukraine and integrate with Ukraine. B, from slow and low haute couture production to massive good enough production. And C, integrated effective European defense market. To start with the first goal, we must continue to support Ukraine, so Ukraine can continue to prevail. And we must integrate European and Ukrainian military and industrial capabilities. This we are doing with the Ukraine support loan, by giving Ukraine access to the European Defence Fund. With the drone alliance we are setting up with Ukraine, and Brave Tech EU, Ukrainian and European companies finding solutions to battlefield challenges. But we need to do much more and go much further. And that is what I would like to stress. We need to do much more. American Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently said, I quote, "The Ukrainian military forces are the strongest and most powerful in Europe." And President of Finland, Alexander Stubb, said, I quote, "There is no army in Europe or the United States, by the way, capable of conducting a modern war the way Ukraine is doing," end of quote. But why do they consider the Ukrainian army the best? My answer, not only because Ukrainian army have brave soldiers and smart commanders, but also because their defense industry is the best and most innovative. And then the next question, and why is the Ukrainian defense industry the most innovative? I got the answer last year when I had informal discussions with prominent Ukrainian leaders of politics and industry who created the drone army in 2023 and who now are leading defense in Ukraine, defense ministry. They made a clear comment, I quote, "If we would have listened to the Ukrainian generals from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, we would not have been able to create the drone army," end of quote. At the very beginning of the war, there was no military demand for drones and for innovative defense. Only after some time in Ukraine, innovative defense supply managed to transform military demand. Thanks to innovative supply, Ukraine changed its war doctrine. Thanks to transformation of its war doctrine, Ukraine is prevailing. It would be difficult to understand if we in Europe would not take it as our vital interest to integrate the best European or even global military force of Ukraine into our European defense architecture. It would be difficult to understand if we did not integrate the most innovative defense industry in the world into our European defense technology industrial base. We must integrate Ukraine into our European defense industry, into our European defense market, and into a future European defense union. Second part of our strategy, we must ramp up production. The money is there. Member states must now start placing big orders, big joint orders, big European orders, including contracts for our war facilities. That will bring long-term visibility for industry, to reduce risk for industry. And industry needs to ramp up production capacity, to keep prices down and meet production deadlines. We can learn from Ukraine's massive defense production big bang, from 1 billion in 2022 to 50 billion in 2026. And we must learn from Ukraine how to make good enough defense products. European defense industry produces haute couture defense products, products that are technologically advanced but difficult to make, expensive and hard to scale up, products that are made in peacetime for peacetime conditions. Ukrainian industry produces weapons for wartime conditions to perform on the battlefield. Good enough weapons to get the job done. Weapons that shoot down drones, stop the enemy advance. Weapons that need rapid production, rapid innovation, rapid repairs. Third part of our strategy. We cannot transform our defense production without transforming our European Union defense market. Member states are responsible for defense. That is a historical, political, and legal reality. Member states need to protect their security interests. But as a result, in the European Union, we have 27 defense markets, 27 sets of rules. And so defense industry still has many obstacles. Obstacles that we have removed for other sectors of the economy in many years of European integration and which have brought massive prosperity. For example, for defense member states, we have different national standards and certifications, 27 different rules. So more national assessments, more testing, more audits, more paperwork, more expensive, especially a burden for startups and SMEs. Another example, transfer licenses for products and components, which create obstacles to production when components are produced in different member states and need to be moved between member states for final assembly. So products stuck at borders, losing time, losing money, disrupting supply chains. The fact that we have no properly integrated defense market is also an obstacle to defense innovation. Fragmentation limits possibilities for innovative newcomers to enter the market. Up to 80% of what our national primes produce is procured by their national governments and national militaries. It means just a few companies are almost monopolizing the whole market. Up to 80% in defense, in general in Europe, is procured using the Treaty on Functioning of European Union, Article 346 exemption, through direct awards. 80% goes through direct awards, without a public competitive tender. Direct awards can be necessary for security, but they have become the default, and this is out of balance. Our primes really are important for our defense, but so are our startups and SMEs. They need space and opportunities too, and without an integrated market, they have no space and no opportunities, because the established status quo on the supply and demand side in the fragmented European markets dominates everything. And that is why transformation of demand and transformation of defense doctrines in Europe is so slow. No market, no transformation. We need a more integrated European defense market for three reasons. First, for our European strategic autonomy. As Enrico Letta and Mario Draghi report show, for European competitiveness, we need a defense market on a European scale. More global competitiveness of our defense industry also means our governments and militaries will buy more European production instead of production from other countries. Second, we need a more integrated European defense market to mobilize the talent of Europe's startups and SMEs, so they can easily enter the market, grow and innovate, and in the end can transform the war doctrines of our countries, like it happened in Ukraine. Sir, we need a more integrated European defense market for our power to defend and deter, for strong supply lines between member states, so we can mobilize the massive power of the European economy and the power of an integrated defense market for our defense. In conclusion, we must ask ourselves, has America got one single defense market, or they have 50? We know the answer. Would America be stronger or weaker if it had 50 separate defense markets on the states level instead of one? Again, we know the answer. So the question is, what are we waiting for? Defense, of course, is a national prerogative, but it is clear that more integrated European defense market will make national industry and national defense stronger, while doing nothing will leave us fragmented and divided and weaker, European and national, at a time when we need to be strong as Europe, a time when Russia is escalating its production and its provocations, a time when America is asking us to step up because in some areas they might step aside. Now is the time to create a more integrated European defense market. Last week, the European Council stressed the importance of the integrated European defense market, its functioning and integration. Next week, I hope that we shall be ready as Commission to present a communication on a more integrated European defense market, with detailed analysis and follow-up steps. Later this year, we will present a proposal to change defense procurement rules and other market rules. We can do it. We have found the money for our defense. We have made the laws for our defense. Now we must create a market for our defense. It's urgent and important we do this, and do this soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. The Commissioner is going to take a brief hydration break. But not for long, because, of course, your speech raises a lot of questions, and our panel is here to try to answer some of them. And you asked some of the questions in your speech yourself, Commissioner. This was a speech filled with urgency. It's no longer so hypothetical that the U.S. might move some of its capabilities out of Europe or away from NATO's potential arsenal. They have told you that they will. Last week's speech by Pete Hegseth punctuated that with even more clarity. So to rephrase the title of our panel, who decides and who delivers, who is not deciding and who is not delivering, because this to-do list that you laid out has been known for many, many years. Why aren't we there yet? Why aren't you closer to being there yet? You now have money. What happens next?
I saw that I answered everything in my speech.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, who's not delivering?
No, it's no. Really, we need to see how to say. It would be very easy to name some kind of miracle decision, silver bullet decision. Perhaps it's not the case. But we need to understand definitely what are the challenges, and that is what I was speaking about. And we need to understand also that we have a lot of historical legacy, and that is most difficult to change. No, and sometimes the biggest problem is not what is written down in regulation, but what is in your head. And that is why, really we are getting up. We are looking really for decisions, but definitely the question who decides in Europe on European defense, which now is becoming really a priority, that is, I was speaking about that for in different occasions, In my view, for time being, as European Union, we do not have a proper platform where to discuss what I call big questions and to find big answers. Council, where I am participating, of 27 members, is not that place. Commission has very limited mandate in general according to the treaties. That is why I propose to create a European Security Council of big member states, maybe a rotational several smaller member states, some institutions present, but really to have this platform to discuss, as it was proposed by Macron and Merkel 10 years ago. In addition to that, what I started to learn really what would be very important in this change, because I believe very much in institutions. I'm always saying that in defense readiness, we need to have material defense readiness, institutional defense readiness, and political defense readiness.
But they're slow.
Yeah, but the problem is that what we need, institutions without people are not, ready to do the job. It appears that in our defense ministries, again, legacies, that they have very strong departments working with NATO, but they have almost no people who are working with European Union. So that is what we shall need to do also in parallel.
Okay, that is one of your ideas that you've been presenting. I'm going to turn to Camille. You have been at NATO. You've been a national official. You have worked as a think tanker. As you have sat in all of these seats, and now as Secretary General of ASD, do you think that would solve things, or where do you think the problem is? And I feel like this is Groundhog Day because I moderate at this summit and many other panels, and you are often with me, and we talk about these same problems. And now there's money, but there still aren't the large-scale orders. There isn't the joint procurement, Camille. How do you explain this, that people don't feel this is urgent?
No, first of all, let's recognize how much we've traveled. Where we were a few years ago, I've said this in my opening remark. I promise I won't be back on another panel. It's just very clear that we've come a long way, and we're making a difference. We've come a long way as member states. We've come a long way as industry, and the Commission is transforming its role in a positive direction. So that is really important. Of course, we're in a delivery phase, and that is critical. Let's recognize that what we are being asked as industry is to literally change the business model over 3 years, which is complicated, demanding, but it is happening as we speak. There's a lot happening, and there are problems that are being solved year after year. There is innovation coming. There is, literally day after day, there is a good news. For those of you who were at Eurosatory, the number of partnerships, of big decisions that have been taken are very, very impressive. And things are happening in Brussels as well. So it's not as if nothing was happening. But what we do need to think is indeed, I would argue two things. One of them, and here I'm quoting my neighbor, Commissioner Kubilius has been saying, we are in an environment where member states decide, industry delivers, and the Commission supports. This is absolutely a perfect definition, but we have to put that into practice and to make sure it does work. And how do we make sure that on those three pillars we make a difference as fast as we can? And for that, there is, I think, some forms of new partnership that need to be invented. How do we make sure that we deliver those capabilities at pace, and how do we think in terms of making it happen? For instance, the point is not in buying 1 million drones and having 1 million drones that will be outdated in 1 year, but how do we work with industry, with companies like Quantum and others, to have a form of partnership that allows constant modernization of the fleet, the ability to produce 1 million more drones if needed. Those things are quite unusual compared to the previous model. So how do we make that happen, not only on drones, but across the board for all those capabilities that you were mentioning that have to do with having treatable large quantities, cost-effective solutions there. Second, and this is where I really want to re-stress something that I've been mentioning and that the Commissioner mentioned, which is the critical importance of enablers. And how do we make sure that those enablers, especially those enablers that might be missing because the US is reprioritizing its allocation of forces, and how does that happen? I mentioned that already, but so that is really, really essential. And that leads to the point of governance. We need to look into the governance of all of these systems. We need to have a better joint decision-making. There is sometimes a feeling seen from industry that the decision-making is fragmented. We always talk about a fragmentation of industry, but decision-making is very fragmented itself, and which doesn't help industry to focus on the right set of priorities, because we have multiple people sharing priorities rather than having a joint decision-making that does work. So that allows to and the point is not having a single owner of everything. The point is, how do we jointly, in a system where the member states will retain the most of the budget and most of the decision making, how do we make sure that we all push in the same direction, which has to do with regulation and cutting red tape, but also has to do with putting the right level of effort in delivering the capabilities that we really, really need tomorrow.
Would this new body that the commissioner is suggesting, would that solve some of the problems where the right conversations are not being held efficiently enough?
No, I think the idea of a Security Council is very attractive to address the wide range of issues. It's also a good way to engage non-EU member states in our work, and we know how important they are in the ecosystem. The issue there for me is really to work on those tools for joint decision making, and I'm not sure, I think this requires a cultural shift by everybody in looking at this and in mobilizing all the resources that we have, which is in itself very demanding because old habits die hard and old habits exist across the board. So that is the challenge that we have. But this is something I think that industry is ready to play. Industry has demonstrated its ability to ramp up production across multiple domains. Of course, we always need to do better and faster, but this is happening. So the issue is how do we amplify that with a very clear objective, which is to be much more capable of defending ourselves and deterring aggression, not over the horizon, but in the next few years.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to turn to industry now, and particularly Christian. There is a success story here, managing to, Theon has now obtained the largest in history, as I understand it, from my Googling, order of night vision goggles, a joint procurement between Belgium and Germany. So this can work. There are success stories out there of joint procurement, not enough, obviously. How did this happen, and how did you make this happen, and what does it tell you about the capability of member states to work together when they feel the need?
Okay, Terry, thank you first of all for being invited here. We have so many distinguished co-panelists. Thank you. Okay, first of all, we were the first competitive process that OCCAR, a transnational within Europe, which includes UK, of course, which is good also. We were the first competitive procurement that they did, which they joined Belgium and Germany. So
could you explain OCCAR in just a couple of sentences?
Yes,
based in Germany?
OCCAR is based in Germany. It consists of basically 6 founding members: Germany, Spain, France, Italy, UK. Yeah, and,
I don't mean to put you under that kind of pressure.
And Belgium. So, and now we were the first experiment, and it worked because they had a very strict internal regulation. Member states, you know, Germany a few years ago had a big problem with the procurement system, and OCCAR has a different system, which is very robust and rigorous. Anyway, we were the first successful experiment, and that's why a lot of other countries like Greece, Cyprus, Canada, UK, they all want to join the procurement processes of OCCAR. And there, magically, it fitted very well the safe mechanism, because the safe mechanism, if you use the OCCAR, it works immediately, automatically. Okay, but allow me to say the following. First of all, I would like to see, I'm very specific when I speak, I try to. I think one of the good things that OCCAR did, because then they did another big tender, which we happened to win, that was on a digital space. And there, because Belgium was a procurement from Belgium and Germany again, and because Belgium, I'm half Belgian by the way, so it was a pleasure, but Belgium had not gotten enough local domestic industrial content through those procurements of OCCAR. So what did the OCCAR people do, which was so simple but smart? They said, okay, whoever maximizes local value added in Belgium, they will get points in the tender. And sure enough, that's what we did. The result is everybody's happy. We just inaugurated 3 months ago, and that's why as a half Belgian, I'm happy, a plant here in Belgium to produce these products. So everybody was happy. There was a competitive tender, was a joint procurement, volume, which means the price dropped, and each country had its local content. So it was a successful experiment. Now, without taxing people's time, I would like to say something about what Commissioner said and Camille. They're absolutely correct. What they're doing, every little step is a big progress for us. I would have liked them to do more on transnational investments. We just invested in France hundreds of millions of euros, and I don't see the reason why, Commissioner, for example, I told you that in Greece, why I have to, aside from the French government, which we have to apply, for small contracts, we have to apply to 2 or 3 other countries within Europe. It's not correct. Secondly, we would like to see as an industry that somehow European Union puts some more financial incentives, not so much in terms of money, but in terms of how it counts in the national debt. I personally believe, from having met all the procurement agencies in Europe, this nationalism, which I will explain later on, there's a different angle of that, this nationalism can be overcome by giving financial incentives, because then the local politicians they are even politically liable if they have a vehicle through which their state can save, aside from the volume of the discount from volume procurement, they can save directly from the European Union and get some benefits. So I believe everything will happen voluntarily. You will not push. We cannot push Germany, we cannot push Poland, we cannot push Greece, France, to do what we want at a European level like that. It has to be more with incentives. And that's why, and everything institutionally the Commission does, it's a big step for us. Now, if you allow me, last point, nationalism, because that's what the root of everything. You know, a current political leader, I'm not going to quote who it is, but it's from a big country. He said something very wisely. You know, you industry, you talk about, and you're pointing a finger basically to politicians, right? And you know, the biggest problem, it's really us, the business leaders. Nationalism is not about somebody in European Union or somebody in France or Germany. It's also a big European company that wants, because of entrenched interest, not to do these global alliances. And I have to tell you, in this, so it is really us, the business leaders, who are responsible. And I have to tell you, whichever European OEM realizes that muscle in today's world, with those new technologies where you can have something from Germany, from Poland, from Portugal, whatever, arising and disrupting everything, muscle itself is not enough. They have to combine it with agility. And I will close with this statement, Terry, if you allow me. 2 weeks ago in Eurosatory, we've announced with Safran a joint venture. We're talking about a company that is 50 times our market cap. Okay, 50 times. There are 150 and we are close to 3 billion market cap. And yet, and I want to congratulate them publicly, they gave us the lead in a joint venture to create the biggest European and global gimbals company in the world. They gave us the lead, equal management rights, of course, a big company, 50 times our size. So what I'm saying, and I will finish there, we have to, the biggest problem, Commissioner, is us, the business leaders. It's not you, it's us. No, it's
so this
us.
was worth coming for, right?
It is us. Whatever you do, it will help big time, but it's us that we must change the mentality. And when European companies see what happened in the States, when SpaceX, not now, 10 years ago, and what Palantir and Anduril did to the bigger companies, they will realize that they better shape up, use their muscle, embrace a German smaller company, a Portuguese company, work with them and get the agility that they do not have. This is a fact. Thank you very much.
Very interesting examples, and it's always nice to hear something from real life and not hypothetical. So, Sven, has this also been your experience at Quantum? Obviously, you're making drones primarily, and this is, as Camille mentioned, one of the problems is that if it takes a year to get a contract, it's no longer for the same product, right? Because everything changes so fast. You need to adapt faster than the contracts can come through, be signed, be paid for. So explain your situation.
If I respond direct to Camille on this topic of stockpiling, I mean, it's, we are a company who is delivering unmanned systems, air, land, and sea, and especially I think the combination of hardware, software, and AI, as Unreal has showcased in the US, this is essential in this new way of warfare. And it's interesting that we're always tackling these topics and questions of how stockpiling and how these systems will look like in 2-3 years. When I buy this iPhone, I believe that this iPhone will work in 3 years because I believe in this company of Apple, that they are innovative enough, adaptive enough to being able to deliver. And Quantum, for example, is able to deliver, and many others also. So why we're always questioning these elements? The right question would be, if I give the order to TKMS or to Rheinmetall on tanks and how they are able to deliver in 3 years or in 2036 on the submarine side, and how they can adapt to this time 10 years from now. This would be the right questions. Don't ask this question on the unmanned systems and innovative side because this is too early. We are in a phase of changing doctrines at this moment now, and Ukraine has showcased it, and I think we are asking these questions too early. And if I talk about procurement and what we have to change, and I think that was your question going in this direction, I think we have to be clearer, Commissioner Kubilius, on the question of, and Germany has these words, fight tonight and fight tomorrow. I think
it's not just Germany.
I think it's
everybody.
Everybody, everywhere around. I think we can be clearer in our execution on these elements. What is needed in fighting tonight? And we are still believing that we are spending the money in the old legacy players, and you said it, we are a little bit frozen in this legacy on companies, legacy on framework. It's really needed that we are having and being disruptive at this moment. When Guderian announced his tank strategy, believe me, nobody was believing in him. Nobody. He's now a hero, so to say, from the view how we are looking at it. But when he was presenting his idea of his speed tank war, everybody was saying, you are a crazy guy. So I think we have to be clearer and reflect the reality of the battlefield of Ukraine, which is the center of gravity. And again, also there, let's think about fight tonight. The enemy tonight is Russia. We can think about who will be the enemy after Russia, but let's ask this question maybe a little bit later. If we have defended the Baltics, if we have defended the eastern flank in the south, Romania, Moldova, and so on, I think then we can ask ourselves these questions. But we are asking these questions quite far too early. If I step into discussions with the armed forces and a lot of generals, I always hear the answers, yeah, we will fight different. And my answer is always, how many kilometers we have between Estonia and Russia?
0.
How many kilometers we have between Lithuania and Russia? 0. How many kilometers we have between Poland and Belarus? How we want to fight different?
Now do Finland.
Yeah.
1,350.
So, yeah, again, and we will not attack them if they are on an exercise. We will attack them because we are like we are with our value, which is correct, if they attack us. So I think, yes, we have to understand more, reflect the reality, think more about the split more of fight tonight and fight tomorrow, and then really, think about like J.D. Vance and Exit and Trump think about it. What does it mean for NATO? What does it mean for our procurement? And what we have to procure? And we read for sure the right mixture of the elements, but we are not talking about the right mixture of the elements. If I look at the SAFE program, which is, from my view, a great program, I mean, you are only able to invest in existing programs. So existing programs can be used, which is good if you are implemented as legacy players, but also we as Quantum, as a neo-prime of armament system, have some chances. We already signed some contracts in Romania and some other countries on this program. But there's no really freedom for new programs. And I think this may be an add-on, Mr. Commissioner, we should add on this program that also new startups, scale-ups have the possibility then to step in and to bring this new technology into war, into action, and into use. I think that's maybe an add-on on this.
Let me just ask the commissioner, because you said, you know, why can Ukraine do this and Europe can't? Well, Europe doesn't believe that tonight means tonight, and Ukraine knows it does. So, I mean, is this a possibility that you could alter the SAFE program, for example, to be more innovative, to be quicker, to be more agile?
Well, I think that our biggest problem, again, I can repeat, legacy, and perhaps that we are still much more ready to fight, not tonight, but yesterday, you know, or day before yesterday. I mean, that's the issue, you know. So this is one thing, and I feel myself, you know, I'm always trying to repeat that to my team and you know, to our services, that when we're talking about defense, usually we're talking about transformation in our defense industry. What is needed, you know? Startups, you know, and so on. Market now, we are talking about that. But we are very little talking about demand. We're talking about supply, how to transform supply, but not how to transform, you know, demand. And that is demand. What does it mean, demand? What our militaries, what our politicians are buying, what they are ready to buy. And if they are buying 70 or 80% of legacy products, that's some, you know, it has some impact.
That's what you said as well, wrong mix.
It has some impact. It means that there is no space for newcomers, or at least that space is very limited. So that is one thing, and that is what I was trying in some, you know, maybe a metaphorical way to explain why Ukraine became a successful country. Because at the very beginning of the war, it's not a success, you know, to have a war. But their, you know, defense success came out from what? They had, you know, very limited defense industrial capabilities. They had, Soviet times, they had really very strong, which means that they have human capital, but industry itself was very weak. And, you know, and that is why when Russians came with all the mass, first of all, you know, young guys, digital minister, Fedorov now defense minister, they started to look for something totally new. They created all those, you know, drone producers, cluster of drone producers, Brave One, drone army, and luckily, General Zaluzhny and Zelensky himself, they understood that this is a way how they can withstand this Russian mass, you know, human mass. And that is how, you know, they started to move ahead, because demand was changing very rapidly, and now demand is demanding from supply really to move ahead in a very rapid way.
But Sven is saying that, if I understand correctly, that the EU is, that the European procurement and the mechanisms are getting in their own way, right? You're saying you could be faster, you could be more like Ukraine.
So that's my point.
I mean, that's what the Commission said. We all can be more like Ukraine, and I think we all have showcased it. So when we are talking about in the past about 100 of systems, so scalability, we are now achieved a lot. Like Kamil said, we are talking about thousands of systems. We are producing 25,000 reusable copters with frontline robotics from Ukraine. We announced last week the joint venture with 10 Core will produce the biggest fleet of Europe, I would say, on UGVs, with 2,000 UGVs for Ukraine. So we are able to do so, especially with our automotive industry all over Europe, in France, in Germany, and all over. We are able to do so, but we are failing on accepting the analysis we have done, the options we are then creating, and the actions on it. So the analysis should be that, again, we need the right mixture. My picture is always, you know, we have the black coffee of the old legacy players. We have the milk of the new defense players. And we have to find the right mixture between these milk and coffee pattern. And we are dipping into the milk and putting it into the black coffee. That's what we do now. And I think there's a cappuccino or more, maybe a latte macchiato needed to having the right mixture, and that's what we have to do. And to quote General Freuding on this, I like to drink cappuccino.
Camille wants to come in. Yeah.
No, this is a fascinating conversation. What is, I think, very complicated. First of all, I want to come a little bit in defense of the. I'm cautious with the overuse of legacy, old legacy, and all of that, because a lot of these companies are investing massively in innovation, are transforming their businesses, are partnering with the new commerce, are creating advanced and new solutions. So this is something that, you know, I don't want to oppose two worlds. I think they need to work hand in hand, as Sven was alluding to. The second thing is that what we have to do is three things at the same time, and those three things don't require the same things. On the one hand, you want to build mass and readiness of existing forces. So, and those existing forces, you need to modernize them, upscale them, add capabilities to them, make sure that they're ready on day one, and that they do deliver defense and deterrence. But you do with what you have, and you bring them up to the next level, you scale them up, you add mass, including with very 20th century technology sometimes, but you try to do this. The second thing you have to do comes back to those enablers capabilities, because we want to be able to operate in very complex environments. We want to be able to command and control them. We want to be able to run complex operations in terms of intelligence, of surveillance, of reconnaissance, of communication systems. This is very demanding, and this, in some instances, does take years to develop such platforms and such systems. It's not something that you do overnight, even though you want to, of course, inject innovation into it. And finally, you want to innovate, and they're learning as much as we can from our Ukrainian friends, find new and disruptive solutions that mitigate the need for human resources, for mass that all armies are no longer to produce. The critical issue is, how do you balance the three as governments, as industry, to get the right mix and get the best cappuccino. But this is where we need to make a difference, and this is where, but it's a little, I think sometimes we want to avoid falling into two caricatures, I would say. One, which is the one Sven was alluding to say, oh, but we would fight differently from the Ukrainians, so we have nothing to learn from that battlefield. That battlefield has transformed warfare, full stop. You know, that's a fact. On the other hand, to say we must do it as the Ukrainians do, I don't think, or you know, the Ukrainians would do it differently if they had different resources. That has put them in a very that has incentivized them to be very disruptive, very innovative, and very successfully so. There are tons of things to be learned from that, and that I think European NATO armies need to do. But it is something that needs to be blended into an environment where we might achieve air superiority, where we need to retain maritime superiority, where we need to be able also to counter a variety of threats that are there, which makes it a slightly different thing than simply cutting and pasting this.
Okay, we have only 2.5 minutes left. I'm sorry, I wanted to bring the audience in, but I'm going to give everybody a chance now to say what you think needs to, and within reason, could be changed most quickly. And I'll start with you, Christian, if you didn't have a second speaking turn here. What would you like to see and you think is possible? Just quickly, very, very briefly.
Yes, I would like, as I said, I will repeat myself. We have to change the mentality as business leaders. This can change. It's not easy to change, but it has to change. And to also give an example to Camille here about the big company versus small companies and so on. Everyone is needed. If you look at an F-35 now, which is the most advanced we have in Europe for the time being, why is it innovative? Because it has a whole fleet of UAVs around it to support it. So it doesn't have to expand itself, expose itself. It has all those small 3 or 4 drones that are flying with it, right? So think about it conceptually. This is the same thing with Europe. You have a main OEM, and you have to have some subcontractors who are most likely different nationality because of new technologies emerge anywhere. And
So stop thinking like it's a zero-sum game. That's what you would
exactly,
want people.
exactly. And allow me to say in French, and I will
Just
then...
very quickly.
Yes,
Very-
shut up. Allow me to say in French, la diversité nationale était une liabilité pour l'Europe. Mais maintenant, pour moi, pour nous, c'est une opportunité. Which means, for those who don't speak French, it means that national diversity used to be, and we see it even today as a liability. For us, with those new technologies, it's an opportunity. You can combine different minds, from Poland to Germany to Greeks to whatever. I find it wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. And Sven, maybe you already gave yours. You gave a couple of suggestions. I'll let you give one more.
Yeah. I mean, let's accept
Quickly.
the reality and let's use the opportunities on the efficiency of cost, efficiency of human capital, efficiency of effectiveness we can bring into this new world. Let's use it and let's act on it in the right manner and let's buy the right stuff to fight tonight and to fight tomorrow.
Come in.
I would say enable European solutions. We are in an environment where European industry can deliver 98% of the capabilities we need. I very much believe that from a technological point of view, from an industrial point of view, the issue is to unleash that potential. And that is something that is happening, but not happening at the pace I would like, and I want to see that happening.
And who decides that? Back to the title.
Again, this is a joint endeavor.
Okay. All right. And Commissioner, one from you. What would you like to see changed? I mean, it doesn't have to be within your power. Let's just, if you could have what you wanted to change quickly, what would you?
No,
what would
first
you
of all,
ask for?
really, I would
But
again,
very short. We're already over
very
time,
short,
sir.
Really, we did a lot altogether. So one thing.
You get one more wish.
What's my wish is speed, to make it even more rapidly. Because just one example. Now we are working on Ukraine support loan, 60 billion, 30 billion per for this year, and we are looking what Europeans can supply to Ukraine. Unfortunately, not so much, in terms of weapons which are needed for Ukraine, and this is for me an issue. How we can speed up all the decisions. Russians produced last year 2,000 missiles, ballistic and cruise missiles. We produced only 250 cruise missiles, no ballistic missiles. Ukrainians started to produce last year Flamingo. This year they will produce 700 because they are producing good enough. What is the problem on our side? Our industries want to start to produce good enough on a massive scale. They say, but you look in regulations. Regulations are demanding to continue producing haute couture. So we need to see also what is needed to be changed, and we need to do that very rapidly.
So throw aside perfection in favor of good enough. All right, thank you very much. I think we've had some good ideas. Thanks to all of you for staying with us. And in case you haven't had enough of talking about a European single defense market, stay in your seats because the next panel coming up, hosted by Nicholas Wallace, is going to continue on this subject. Thank you very much.